It's day 122 of the second Trump administration, and moments ago, the House Rules Committee voted to bring that House Republican budget bill to the House floor. We could see a full vote from the House overnight, sometime in the next few hours. Meanwhile, chaos has already returned to the stock market, all thanks to Trump's tax and spending bill. The Dow plunged more than 800 points over concerns of spiking Treasury yields and the projected new debt from the Republicans' budget bill. Depending on which independent analysis you look at, this bill could increase the federal deficit between $2 and $4 trillion over the next decade and force cuts to Medicaid. But neither those deficit projections nor even the almighty bond market appear to have swayed Republicans, who are charging ahead on the legislation at the president's command. New changes released tonight include moving earlier work requirements for Medicaid to the end of 2026 and expanding the state and local tax deduction to $40,000. Earlier this evening, House leaders sounded pretty confident. Watch this.
I feel very confident that we're going to keep this bill moving tonight. There were some people that were no walking onto the floor that ultimately voted yes, and I'm confident that we're going to get them there today.
Remember, Republicans can only afford to lose 3 GOP votes on the House floor, given their very narrow majority. And with that, let's bring in our leadoff panel. MSNBC Daily senior editor Anthony Fisher, Notice congressional reporter Daniela Diaz, and Carol Leonnig, a Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative reporter with The Washington Post. Thanks, everyone, for joining me. Danielle, I want to start with you. So this bill just passed out of the Rules Committee moments ago. Talk to us about where things stand and what we should expect tonight.
Catherine, I have to say, I was just there. I was watching all of these members work overnight this morning to figure out whether they were going to be able to pass this package. Democrats fighting against this package, Republicans really moving forward. And it was really, really interesting to see this complete shift from Republicans in the last few hours, especially those conservatives that were furious that Speaker Mike Johnson cut a deal with those SALT Republicans, those blue state Republicans who wanted an increase on the caps on the state and local deduction tax. They wanted more spending. And in the last couple of hours, they got a lot of changes. They actually were able to move up work requirements for Medicaid. People who qualify for Medicaid, that was a major thing that conservative Republicans, House Freedom Caucus members were pushing for. And that's why we're seeing this escalate so quickly, Catherine, is because those deals were cut in the last few hours. And now Republicans might have the votes. Speaker Mike Johnson might have the votes to be able to bring this over the finish line. It might happen overnight. Sounds like they're moving quickly on this.
Yeah, I have to say this happened way faster than I was expecting it to, given how much disagreement there was on this bill, like seemingly mutually exclusive demands for how it should change. But Anthony, it's still, even as it stands, a huge political liability, it seems like, for Republicans, including because the Congressional Budget Office said that the amount that the bill would add to the deficit, at least the version of the bill we saw before, would force Medicare cuts. Medicare, not Medicaid. Don't you think, or do you think, Republicans will pay some sort of political penalty for that?
You'd think. I mean, they're going against the CBO reports, basically saying this is fiscally irresponsible, and Trump promised not to cut Medicare. So there's a campaign promise broken, and the entire philosophy that they're going to be cutting waste and being more fiscally responsible, certainly more fiscally responsible than supposedly the irresponsible Democrats. This doesn't seem to deliver any of that. It seems like the big, beautiful bill is a complete mess. But I don't know. It remains to be seen whether they'll pay any political price for this, because they seem to be moving the goalposts constantly and able to distract their own base sufficiently.
Yeah, I mean, I would imagine that voters may not care so much about the deficits thing until there's a bond market retaliation, which we've already started to see. But Medicare, man, you know, older people vote.
Right. And you know, like the blue state Republicans are pushing for, you know, expanding the SALT cap, but Medicare is going to hit closer to home. Medicare is not going to be something that they can wave away on, you know, egg-headed blue state Republicans. This is something that is going to affect a lot of people in the Trump base, and I don't know how you're going to divert the blame from that if that, in fact, goes into effect.
Yeah, I wonder that too. So, Carol, let's say this does pass through the House in the middle of the night tonight with some Medicaid cuts, cutting in even earlier, potentially forcing in Medicare cuts later on. Well, it'll depend what the score looks like. What do you think the dynamics will look like in the Senate, particularly given that some Republican senators have balked at slashing Medicaid at all?
Hate to use the old trope, Catherine, but you know, the Senate is the saucer that cools the cup, and you can already hear the senators balking and mooing about this exact thing because they don't want to touch that third rail. And ultimately, if the whole point and the whole campaign that Trump kept beating this drum of we're going to save you all this money, we're going to protect you, we're going to return this economy, we're going to fight this crazy deficit, we're going to bring it down. You know, you said at the top of the hour, a $2 to $4 trillion addition to the deficit, and we're going to give the richest households more tax cuts under this, and we're going to hurt other people at the lowest tenth of the economy, the lowest tenth of households. I think the estimate that I saw was that the lowest tenth of Americans will get a 2% reduction in their household income, and the richest tenth will get a 4% estimated increase because of the tax cuts. The Senate's not going to love the look of that.
Yeah, and I would imagine with this expanded SALT cap, you may actually even see bigger gains for the richest tenth of Americans. But, you know, we'll see. We'll see what the numbers look like. Daniela, meanwhile, the Senate unexpectedly and unanimously today passed the No Tax on Tips Act. A version of this proposal, we should say, is already in the GOP spending bill, the thing that's probably going to get voted on tonight. So why bother passing it separately?
It really sent an interesting message, Catherine, that it was Democrats who actually called for this unanimous consent for this no tax on tips proposal, which is a Republican-led proposal. It's something that President Donald Trump talked about for a long time on the campaign trail. It's something he pushed. And now it was two Democrats in the Senate pushing for this. It was originally something that was introduced by Senator Ted Cruz. So it shows that not every single thing in this Republican bill is opposed by Democrats. It was really a message to send to voters that they do want to help working class people. And really interesting that this was done by unanimous consent, meaning they did it by voice vote. It was not a messy process, done quickly. A huge message to send to people back home.
Just to switch gears for a second, we need to talk about some of the other big news of the day, which is that the president of South Africa met Trump at the White House today, ostensibly to discuss trade. But their conversation was somewhat derailed when Trump falsely claimed that there had been a genocide against white Afrikaners. Our own Peter Alexander has some more on this. Take a listen.
Tonight, another extraordinary Oval Office meeting. President Trump hosting the leader of South Africa, kicking it off with this unusual introduction.
President Ramaphosa, and he is a man who is certainly in some circles really respected, other circles a little bit less respected, like all of us, in all fairness, like all of us.
We all like that.
The meeting quickly turning into a tense confrontation. President Trump accusing South Africa's black majority government of not doing enough to protect white minority farmers from racial persecution.
They're white farmers, and they feel that they're going to die.
And after amplifying unsubstantiated claims of genocide, the president was asked if he believes it's happening.
I haven't made up my mind. I hate to see it from the standpoint of South Africa.
The Trump administration this month fast-tracked 59 white Afrikaner refugees to become American citizens, despite effectively banning others, including Afghans, many of whom had risked their lives to help U.S. forces. Today, I pressed President Trump why it's appropriate to welcome white Afrikaners when other refugees have had their protected status revoked.
We've had tremendous complaints about Africa, about other countries too, from people. They say there's a lot of bad things going on in Africa, and that's what we're going to be discussing today. When you say we don't take others, all you have to do is take a look at the southern border.
The president was then asked what it would take to convince him there was no white genocide. Ramaphosa jumping in.
It will take President Trump listening to the voices of South Africans, some of whom are his good friends.
Then, in an unprecedented move, President Trump directed an aide to play a video for the visiting president.
Excuse me, turn the lights down. Turn the lights down.
Showing South African opposition leaders calling for violence against white farmers.
We are cutting the throat of whiteness.
And alleged burial sites.
I'd like to know where that is, because this I've never seen.
Okay. I mean, it's in South Africa. That's
We need to find out.
These are people that are officials, and they're saying that kill the white farmer and take their land.
Ramaphosa saying he strongly rejects the messages in the video.
Our government policy is completely against what he was saying.
Acknowledging violence, including in rural areas, but saying most crime victims are black.
There is criminality in our country. People who do get killed, unfortunately through criminal activity, are not only white people. Majority of them are black people.
Carol, I want to start with you, even though it's hard to know where to start with this. With everything happening right now, why is this the issue that Trump is pressing?
I cannot begin to answer that question, Catherine, but I could tell you what I think is going on and what sources have been telling people at our paper. And Donald Trump is often wooed and seduced by a lot of social media, especially conspiracy theories. And this has been promoted on some social media platforms, this idea that white farmers are running for their lives and being, killed in large numbers. The actual numbers are, 1% of all murders in the entire country of South Africa, according to the estimates of their own government, involve white farmers. White farmers have been killed, no question about it. But President Ramaphosa is absolutely right that so many more crimes and victims are actually black. And so this reminds me, as I'm sure it does for you, Catherine, of some of the Fox News coverage during the presidential campaign that suggested things that you and I never saw in our cities on the East Coast, in Boston, Washington, New York, suggesting that immigrants were running wild and killing Americans, and cities in America were such dangerous hotspots because of all this crime being committed by immigrants that were illegally running around the country, especially in our cities. None of us experienced that. The numbers did not bear that out, but it was very popular in terms of a conspiracy that was being promoted on some sites and in social media. The tragedy here is Donald Trump has access to the absolute best information in the world. It's called the Presidential Daily Brief. And he's able to ask additional questions if he has them. And if he asks his intelligence community about this, the answer will be definitively exactly what President Ramaphosa told him in the Oval Office.
Anthony, the last time we saw an engagement like this between Trump and another foreign leader was when Zelensky visited the Oval Office. I think a lot of people were hoping that was a one-off conflagration. Should this be the kind of treatment that most foreign leaders should expect when they visit?
No, but it could be the kind of treatment that they could expect if they run afoul of the president's most influential followers, perhaps even like Elon Musk, who was both highly critical of Zelensky and was in the rooms apparently sending smoke signals across the room to the president, who shouted out to him during this meeting. Elon Musk, I've read so many articles over the last few days saying he's left D.C., he's done, he's not influential anymore. He's clearly very influential, and a great deal of that messaging came directly from him to the administration. And as Carol said, Elon Musk the president is a purveyor of conspiracy theories, but so is Elon Musk, and so are a lot of people in that inner circle. And so I don't know if all leaders who come to the Oval Office should expect this experience, but if they've run afoul of people who are credulous enough to buy these conspiracy theories, they might have something to worry about.
Yeah, depending on who has Trump's ear at any given moment. Carol, Trump has performed this Oval Office ambush twice, as we've discussed. Why should any foreign leader feel comfortable meeting with the president when they know they could be next for a setup like this?
Comfort, I don't think, is anything anybody can expect in these kinds of settings. But, let's be clear. President Trump is the most powerful leader in the world, despite many of the decisions he's made to cut off alliances, to basically burn people who've been behind America's back and with us and at our shoulder through many a crisis. Despite all of that, he's still the most powerful leader in the world. And people who cross him, right, who decide, oh, I don't want to accept that invitation, may be in worse shape than if they came and got the dressing down inside the room. There's one thing I'll say about Donald Trump that I have experienced firsthand. He is pretty firm in his views, but he also respects those who can go toe to toe. He doesn't love to be disagreed with, let's be clear, but he, if you can give him facts, you can give him information. I think that is probably more impressive to him than saying, never mind, I don't really need this. I don't need to sit down with you. I'm maybe a little bit frightened of the lack of comfort I might have inside the West Wing.
Daniela, what are lawmakers saying about this meeting today?
Well, look, Republicans are always going to stand by President Donald Trump. They're always going to defend his actions when it comes to any sort of abrupt meetings he's having with foreign leaders on Capitol Hill. It's the way he's operated. It's just as Carol has said, he has always operated like this since his first term. And there's absolutely no way that any of them are really going to defy him when it comes to these issues, especially when it comes to foreign affairs and tariffs, which they've stood by him on all these issues from the beginning. Maybe a couple have not stood with him, but for the most part, they have. Now, to be clear, Capitol Hill is very distracted right now, trying to, especially in the House side, pass the budget reconciliation bill. So that's what we've seen from these lawmakers over the last couple of hours. You could see that there's a motion to adjourn happening on the House floor, but the reality is that lawmakers are focused on this and trying to finish that overnight, as you can see.